Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whilst the Labour front bench continue to peddle their own form of dog whistle politics, Reform UK...
Parliament erupts as Lee Anderson confronts Keir Starmer and Labour MPs over shocking exchange. You're not going to believe what just unfolded inside the UK Parliament. Because while the headlines were focused on the usual political noise, something far more explosive was happening on the floor, in real time, with every camera rolling. And yes, it involved Lee Anderson. It involved Keir Starmer. And it left the entire Labour bench frozen in the kind of silence that tells you everything. Let's get into it. Parliament was already tense that morning, the way it gets when MPs can sense a storm coming. People shifting in their seats, whispers bouncing from one row to another, reporters tapping their phones waiting for that one clip that would go viral. Then Lee Anderson stood up. And the room changed. He didn't raise his voice, not at first. He didn't point fingers, didn't launch into theatrics. Instead, he leaned into the microphone, paused, and delivered a question that felt less like politics and more like a mirror being held up to the Labour leadership. A question aimed right at Keir Starmer. You could see Starmer brace for it. Adjust the papers. Quick look sideways. Those little gestures that say, I know something's coming, and I can't avoid it. Anderson began by referencing the ongoing frustration many voters have been voicing, not about policies, not about party branding, but about Parliament's disconnect from the people it's meant to serve. Then he launched into an example, a story circulating through communities, a concern he said millions were whispering but nobody in the Labour front bench wanted to touch. The tension was instant. He didn't accuse anyone of wrongdoing. But he pressed Starmer calmly, directly on decisions and positions that many feel have alienated working-class voters. And that's when the eruption started. Before Starmer could even get halfway into his prepared response, Labour MPs began murmuring loudly, some shaking their heads, some signaling to the Speaker, others visibly irritated that Anderson's words were landing so sharply. But the public gallery, the journalists, the observers sat dead still. You could almost feel the oxygen leave the room. Because this wasn't just another political clash. This was a pressure point pressed at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way, with millions watching. Starmer responded, of course. He always does. Measured tone, deliberate phrasing, the kind of polished political answer he's known for. But something was different this time. The reaction from his own MPs wasn't unified. Some looked frustrated. Some concerned. A few avoided eye contact entirely. One senior political analyst who spoke to a UK outlet put it this way. This wasn't about policy. This was about credibility. Anderson forced Starmer to answer a question Labour has been dodging for months, and the reaction on the benches showed it. On social media, the moment caught fire instantly. Within minutes, clips were everywhere. One viewer wrote, "This is the most honest exchange we've seen in Parliament all year. Finally someone saying what people are thinking." Another posted, "Labour needs to address these concerns instead of brushing them aside." Anderson speaking up shook the whole room. Even commentators who don't usually side with Anderson admitted the same thing whether you agree with him or not. The confrontation tapped into a wider frustration brewing across the country. And that's what made this moment bigger than the two men involved. Because what unfolded wasn't just a clash between political rivals. It was a reflection of something deeper, a growing divide between voters who feel overlooked and leaders who feel cornered by rising demands for clarity, authenticity, and accountability. Back inside Parliament, the Speaker had to step in several times as the noise escalated. Anderson pushed forward, Starmer answered again, Labour MPs grew more animated. At one point it almost felt like the tension would spill over into full chaos. But here's the thing. Even after the shouting died down, even after the Speaker restored order, the energy in the room didn't go back to normal. It couldn't. The question had been asked. The reaction had been seen. And the country watching from home, from buses, from offices had already formed their own opinions. Political insiders later said the Labour front bench held urgent discussions about the exchange, concerned about how the moment was being interpreted outside Westminster. One insider reportedly told a journalist, "This is the type of confrontation that sticks. It makes the public pay attention." Another added, "The reaction on our benches didn't help. It made us look rattled." And that may be the real story here. Not the question. Not the answer. But the reaction. Because when Parliament erupts the way it did, when MPs visibly struggle to contain frustration, when one question sends shockwaves through both sides of the aisle, it tells you something bigger is happening. It tells you people are tired of political rehearsals. Tired of vague statements. Tired of leaders dodging discomfort instead of addressing it head-on. And when someone like Lee Anderson walks in and speaks plainly, even if you disagree with him, that authenticity hits differently. It forces a response. It forces a moment. It forces clarity. So here's the real question that hangs over Westminster tonight. If one simple confrontation can unsettle an entire parliamentary bench, what happens when the next big issue hits? What happens when voters demand answers that can't be softened, delayed, or avoided? And if this is just the beginning, how much deeper does the divide go? One thing is certain. Whatever happens next, Parliament won't be the same after this.